I want to welcome Marko Budiselić, the CTO of MemGraph.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? How many of you actually were thinking about licensing for your software? Please raise hands. A few. I expected a bit more, but it's fine. Anyway, today I'm here to speak about open source, enterprise, and cloud offerings, and how to figure out the business out of the whole thing. Some issue. Anyway, I'm Marko, and I was thinking what to do with the intro, and then these days it's obviously very funny to, very wise to ask ChatGPT to give an overview, and I guess I wouldn't do this in a better way. I'm Marko, CTO and co-founder at MemGraph. Usually I do a bunch of stuff on the technology side and also on the company side. But more and more, I'm in charge of the product and figuring out with the customers where is the value, and then deliver the value on the tech side, working with the tech team, and on the engineering side, figuring out how to provide the value. All right, a bit about MemGraph. So MemGraph is essentially a tool for developers, which helps with figuring out how to model data as a graph and then run these graph analytics on top. So a graph is from the graph theory. It's a set of nodes and relationships. And whenever you have data in that format, or data that can be modeled as a graph, MemGraph is a tool that should help you model and then ingest a bunch of data and then run these graph analytics. Usually it's possible to apply these algorithms in almost any industry, any use case. I would pick, let's say, fraud detection or cybersecurity, or let's say supply chain optimizations as the best use cases. Usually when people talk about graphs, they mention social graphs and stuff like that. I would argue that that's not the best use case. It's very easy to comprehend. But for example, even at Facebook, the graph is not that big in diameter. It's actually, you can reach anyone in the world in, let's say, 3 hops these days. And it's actually shrinking because more and more people are connected. A few years ago, it was 4 hops. Now it's much less. Anyway, the graph is really useful when you have, let's say, 20 or 30 hops in depth, and then you can explore these relationships and figure out interesting insights based on the exploration of the graph, and that's for what MemGraph is. Even more generic explanation is that MemGraph helps with mapping of all these algorithms and graphs to the modern hardware, because under the hood everything is an array of zeros and ones, and the question is how to map these algorithms in the best possible way. And that's what MemGraph really helps with, because it provides a bunch of easy-to-use primitives to deal with the data, to model data, and etc. There are many different products out there that try to do similar thing, but I would say that MemGraph is really focused on ease of use, so making these things really accessible to the developers. So there is a declarative query language where you can query data and run these algorithms, and also there is a standardized protocol to communicate from any programming language and connect from any app out there. That's kind of how do you start, but then the hardest problems are speed and scale. So providing these analytics to be very performant and then also very scalable, so that you can take a bunch of data in and then perform these analytics. says. Yeah, this has a delay. Anyway, so how did we start actually? So we started in 2016, and in the beginning, the idea was to not do any type of open source because we didn't know what we are actually doing. The focus was only on figuring out the actual product and implement all the things because we started totally from scratch, and it was really hard to think back then about the open source strategy. But it took us 5 years to actually decide and figure out what's the right path in terms of open source software. In the retrospect, I think we should have done that much sooner. So we should come up with the strategy and figure out how to actually position in the open source world much sooner, because I will talk about that later. An obvious benefit is, huge adoption you can get from the open source software, and a lot of developers can actually try it out, and people are much more willing to experiment if something is open source. Anyway, the takeaway here is that, with any type of software, you should think very fast and early on about the strategy and how to position your software. There are many different options. I'll talk a bit later about that. But anyway, as soon as we started thinking about it, then you have to do some research, figure out what's out there. There are many open source licenses these days. It's very hard to know details about all of them. But on one hand, there is a bunch of stuff you have to figure out. But on the other side, there is a lot of opportunities and a lot of options in terms of how to actually position and how to actually, what to pick, what to do. There are many different options you can actually choose. Then also you have to think about your specific context and how all these applies to the product, to the company, how that's going to evolve and stuff like that. And at the end, decision has to be there, and sooner is better than later, usually. Okay, let's deep dive into that. How the whole world evolved in terms of open source. This is actually an image from A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz blog post, which I think is very compelling. So before 90s, there were actually free software. A bunch of people just started implementing software and then putting it out there to be free. The point was to be free and accessible, and that was, it's called here like open source 0.0. It was like, ARPANET and Free Software Foundation and stuff like that. I don't know much about that back then because I wasn't born then yet, but apparently, that's how the whole thing started. Then interesting things started to happen in 90s because obviously Linux came in, and companies started to think about how to actually monetize the whole open source software, and then I guess that then actually the open source as a term emerged, and people started talking more about it. Obviously, the best company, the well-known company is probably Red Hat, because of they're very well known for the strategy to actually to monetize open source software by support and services they provide. Anyway, that was the model during the 90s, and then in 2020s and in 2000 and later, much more things started to happen in terms of the monetization and how actually the whole world evolved in that sense. And not just you have a bunch of open source software, but then also these software as a service offerings started to emerge because the whole cloud started to grow, and people are really trying to monetize open source software by offerings in the cloud. Probably the best examples are Elastic and Mongo. And these are examples in the database space because in the database there is actually that's a subset of software as a service called database as a service. When you offer a database service as as a service in the cloud. I'll talk more about the different options in terms of licensing, but essentially here there is a divergence between open source software and then the SaaS software, because there is actually like two options. As a startup, or as a company, you build your own software by using open source software because you don't want to get locked in some to some specific vendors, or you don't want much dependencies on specific companies. So you built your software by using an open source software, or you're using software as a service because it's easier, because you have some capital you can deploy, and you decide to use, I don't know, Slack or some other services out there, because it's just much easier to use that than building these things on yourself, on your own. All right, that's kind of the state of world. And then there is a few interesting concepts I would like to explain. First one is open core versus open crust. Not sure how many of you heard these terms, but yeah, there is an option to provide your software as an open core type of thing, where the core is actually open source, and then you build a lot of, let's say, proprietary modules on top, and by doing that, you're actually monetizing the whole thing. Or on the other side, there is also a concept of open crust, which is kind of a different thing. You basically have closed source core of the product, and then you build a lot of open source modules on top. Memref is kind of a mix between these two, because our core is open source / source available. I'll tell more about that. And we have a bunch of these modules which are built on top, which can be used like in different contexts. In terms of licenses, there are many different licenses which are applicable in the let's say database space, starting from MIT, BSD, and Apache 2, which are the most permissive licenses out there. So basically, you can do whatever you want with a software which is licensed under these licenses, and that's probably known to all of you very much. So I guess I don't have to explain much about these. But in terms of the database softwares, there are these three licenses which are really interesting. First one is AGPL, where it's kind of if you use software licensed under this license, you actually have to publish all the modifications and additions to that software. You are forced to do that and to push to publish that. Then there is also a server-side public license defined by Mongo. So basically, they wanted to protect themselves against large cloud providers. Because I'll explain a bit later why is that so important. But a large cloud providers just come in and like start monetizing software without contributing a lot of things back, and then Mongo came in with that. But that license is kind of very strict in terms of rules, because you have to publish actually all your service which is using that software. So not just the modification to the code and extensions. You have to actually publish and put it public, the whole code which is using the software which is under this license. And then there is a business source license. That's kind of the most interesting license to me, because it's actually tweakable. So you can there is after a certain period of time, that license converts into Apache 2. So effectively, the whole software becomes open source. And there is also additional clause you can include and tweak how the actual software is licensed, and what are the options in terms of what, as a user, what you have to do with that code. Anyway, and then the last thing is open source versus source available. There is many different opinions about what is what. Usually, when it comes to open source, there is a standardization body called OSI, and then they define what is open source and what's not. And there is like a very strict set of rules and set of guides when a software is open source. And for example, on their side, the source available is a term used for all these like derived licenses, which are not strictly open source, but provide some benefit of open source. So technically speaking, memgraph is actually source available, but we like to talk about open source because there are all these benefits which people care about. Anyway, so maybe to explain a bit more about what memgraph does. So we have a few offerings, and the most interesting one from the open source perspective is memgraph community, which is actually licensed under BSL with that conversion clause. So after 4 years, BSL license will be transformed into Apache 2. And after that, the software is fully under Apache 2. But BSL actually gives users and customers these 3 fundamental rights: right to inspect, right to repair, and right to improve. And I mean, from our experience, these are actually like the 3 most important rights everyone cares about. And if you provide that, everyone is kind of happy with that. And BSL does that. So you can do these 3 things, and it's not like in any way limiting. What's specific to memgraph, with that BSL license, you can actually run the community software in production without any limitation or any anything which is not okay in production. And not just that, the community's version of the software also has a lot of these production features like replication, authentication. These features are usually packaged in the enterprise version of products, but in memgraph that's all available. And basically the only limitation on the BSL side is the clause which prevents big cloud providers to actually come in and deploy the software and then not paying anything back to the original business. And the reason why that's unfair is because big cloud providers have like a lot of services out there which can be combined with your service, and when a developer comes in, he's much more likely to use memgraph deployed in the cloud context than anywhere else, because he has all these services. And that's fine. Cloud providers can still do that. They can still include memgraph in the offering, but they have to put something back. They have to contribute back to the business somehow. And yeah, last thing. So in the memgraph case, so memgraph community has all these optimizations, and we don't have like a proprietary optimization code or anything like that. That's all in part of the community, because our intention there is to actually figure out the community of developers using it, and then scale the whole like community of developers as fast as possible, and everyone should be able to access the software, and the fastest version of the software and the most scalable version of the software, and put that in production as fast as possible. So that's the intention on the community side. Yeah. Then, in addition to the community, there is also an enterprise version of memgraph. And the way how we think about that, it's actually all the compliance features and some quality of life type of features are in the enterprise version of the product. The reason for that is that, yeah, there is a lot of these enterprise requirements. There is a nice website called Enterprise.io, which specify a bunch of things that have to be supported so that enterprise companies will actually use some software. And to build all of that, you have to build build the engineering team, and you have to build a bunch of you have to spend a bunch of hours and times to develop all these things. And like enterprises could on their own build these things if they really want, but usually they want to pay for these things, and that's how we are actually trying to monetize the enterprise part of the software. It's important to emphasize that it's the whole pricing model is based actually on consumption, so it's not based on like any particular feature or anything, any like special support. It's actually based on how much you consume. We actually charge per amount of memory. So if you have like 1 terabyte of RAM, we will pay it for that amount of RAM, and that's it. And one important thing is that it's the same binary. So member of enterprise and member of community are actually the same binary. And when you run, let's say, the community version of it, by running the same binary, you can just switch easily to the enterprise version, and then you get these features available. And then the last offering is actually MemGraph Cloud, which is designed to figure out the whole cloud offering and figure out how to provide software in the cloud. We are not very heavy actually on the cloud because we just try to figure out the fastest way for developers to use MemGraph, and like the easiest way, and it's usually not the cloud, but in the long run, I think the cloud is like strategically important because more and more people are just using the cloud because it's just easier in the long run. You don't have to spin up like a large teams of engineers to figure out and deploy software. And for an enterprise, cloud is a very convenient thing because you can just pay some money, and then you get a bunch of services without like managing a bunch of teams. But yeah, Member has fully managed version of enterprise binary inside the cloud. And yeah, it's easy to start, it's easy to run some workload. But just a note on that side, it's not yet fully production ready, meaning that in the cloud, usually there are some additional compliance stuff and encryption and a bunch of additional requirements for the enterprises so that they can use something in the cloud, which is not fully available yet. But yeah, working on that, it will probably be soon. All right. And then maybe to explain the concepts and trade-offs. So usually with the open source software, you can achieve like much bigger growth, especially if the software is more permissive. So for example, if you pick Apache 2 license as an option, that's very permissive, and everyone will be super happy by using that type of software. The issue is that with that comes a risk, because if the software is really good, if the software is providing some value, somebody else will for sure try to monetize the whole thing and try to leverage that on the business side. And then there is obviously a risk of not having the ability to control the whole thing. But yeah, there is obviously a balance there that has to be hit somehow. But yeah, just like a concept, if you have like a more permissive software, it's much easier to grow and much easier to scale number of people using the software. But on the other side, there is a risk with all these big cloud providers and other people that will try to use the software and not contributing back. But anyway, probably in the early days, it's required to be very permissive just to build a community of developers and then grow. But yeah, later on, you have to figure out how to make the whole thing sustainable. I guess the whole BSL thing is quite good quite good balance between these two things. But yeah, we'll see how we'll be able to grow and then later to monetize on that. There are examples on both ways. So a lot of database software is actually fully open source by Apache 2. And I guess if you're starting something from scratch, know that you're trying to build, again, the community of people using it, then it's probably better to be open source. But if you're targeting existing market, and if you really have a set of customers which you know will pay for the service, then it's maybe better to be closed source. Probably the best example on that side is Snowflake, a company called Snowflake. They really built a big business by being closed source at the moment. But for us, I think that's not really the strategy, because it's really hard to gain traction and bring more people in. Yeah. Anyway, to wrap up, I mean, the way how we think about the open source is that open source is super important to get the adoption and bring more people in. But yeah, if the product is solving the value and solving problem and providing value, don't be afraid to open source, because it's really like a crucial mechanism to grow. And yeah, like the whole thing with adoption is really important, because yeah, you want to get more people in, try things out, iron bugs, scale on that side. But yeah, always consider the risk that comes with it, because yeah, some companies really got in trouble because of these things. Most notably, Mongo and Elasticsearch had very huge issues with AWS and how they positioned against them. But anyway, if you have a software that provides value and which is reasonably packaged, people will buy it 100%. It's always like there is a saying that people buy from other people, and that's 100% true, because yeah, on one side you really have to have a strong product, but once that's there, then you have to build a relationship and figure out how to actually make a deal. Anyway, that's it. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the conference. I hope it's going to be great. Tomorrow, Katarina and Vlasta will present more about memgraph. There is a workshop about memgraph and how to use graphs. That's 11:45. Yeah, we have a bunch of channels through which we try to communicate. Visit our Discord channel, discord.gg/memgraph. And also there is the GitHub repo. Please give us a star if you like the software. And yeah, thank you.